This is about ownership under Islamic economic model.
Before we talk about ownership under Islamic economic model, we must know what is ownership first.
Ownership is the status of exclusive right and power over property that can constitute any commodity, property, land, and intellectual property. Ownership is classified into public ownership and private ownership. Private ownership indicates a right over property which excludes others and enables the owner to make use of the property itself. Private ownership is most likely to be found in the market system rather than the common system that most of the property belongs to the government. In the market system, private individual and firm own most of the private property resources of land and capital. Private property, coupled with the freedom to negotiate binding legal contract, enable individual and business to obtain, control, use and dispose of this property. Private property right encourage investment, innovation, exchange of assets, maintenance of the property, and economic growth. Property right extend to intellectual property through patent, copyright, and trademark. In this video, we will talk about the definition of ownership in the Islamic economic model, acquisition of ownership, constraint and limitation of ownership, and protection of ownership.
According to the Islamic religion, the true ownership of all things belongs to Allah, and humanity is charged with behaving upon property in compliance with what has been ordained. It is clearly defined that property rights are fundamental to Islam, since one of the Shariah's objectives is the preservation of property. The Quran specifically states that Allah has produced all the riches on earth and in the heaven that are available. Therefore, with all its capital, wealth, and output variables, He is the true owner of this planet. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala said in the Quran, "To Allah belongs all that is in the heaven and all that is on the earth," in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 284. In certain matters, such as water, grass, and fire, Islam has also recognized the right of common ownership. They are for the common good, and no one, including the state, can own them. Everyone is equally entitled to profit from them instead. In the current context, it can well be inferred that the resources that the general public may require may not be privately owned to relieve individuals of possible hardships. This does not necessarily imply that the state would own such resources. So, it is clear that Allah is the true owner of this world.
Every human being deserves equal chances and opportunities to acquire the ownership of property. An individual or collective owners may obtain ownership of a property through three ways, which are contracts, inheritance, and first possession of natural resources. One of the types of contract as a method to gain ownership of a property is contract on sales. The purpose behind a contract of sales is to enable the parties to exchange their counter values with mutual consent, while its effect is the transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer. The practice of sales contracts, according to the Sharia, will prevent the sales being done unfairly. The unfairness in contract of sales includes bribery, usury, gambling, and many more.
Assalamualaikum brother.
Waalaikumsalam, brother.
I am selling instant noodle for RM1 per packet. Do you want to buy some?
Yeah, sure. Give me 2 packets.
Okay, 2 packets. Sure brother.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Thank you for buying.
Okay. You're welcome, brother.
Okay, good luck.
Inheritance is known as transferring the rights or ownership of a property to somebody else upon one's death. In Islam, inheritance is known as fara'id, which includes the rules of division of one's property after the deceased according to the Sharia laws. The beneficiaries of a property are usually people that are directly related to the blood of the deceased, such as spouses and family. Now, we look at a scenario of a family that consists of a husband, a wife, and 2 children.
Even though Allah SWT gave freedom to human beings to acquire and utilize the properties owned, there are still limitations and constraints to these rights. Firstly, the limitations of acquiring ownership are classified into 2, which are halal and haram. It is haram to acquire ownership of a property through stealing, gambling, bribery, and other means that are against the public's interest and can clamor justice in the society. This is also aligned with the 16th Sustainable Goal, which is peace and justice, and it is also mentioned in the Holy Quran. And do not eat or take the property of others among you in the wrong way, nor do you hand over your property, give bribes to the judges because you want to eat or take part of human wealth by committing sin when you know the wrong. Businesses are forbidden to own things that are prohibited in Islam, such as alcohol and pigs. The prohibition includes selling, serving, and buying these things. Secondly, there are constraints to the utilization of the properties that businesses own. Businesses cannot use the properties for something that will lead to gharar, maisir, and riba. Moreover, businesses should not waste the property, either waste because it is not utilized or is utilized but not in the proper amount. The 12th SDG also emphasizes responsible consumption and production. And do not waste. Indeed, those who waste are the brothers of the devil, and the devil is very disobedient to his Lord.
Islam has decreed laws and regulations to ensure the protection of the property ownership. It outlaws ownership by unlawful means such as cheating, fraud, deception, and piracy. One is not allowed to own property of others as he wishes without the consent of the owner, and he must refer to the Sharia laws in order to obtain the ownership through lawful permission. Allah has promised severe punishment for those who are involved in stealing. He commanded in the Quran,
وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَا نَكَالًا مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ.
As for male and female thieves, cut off their hands for what they have done, a deterrent from Allah, and Allah is Almighty, All-Wise. Other laws that protect the ownership of property are the copyright law and patent. Copyright is an exclusive right granted to the original authors of intellectual property such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in commerce for a fixed number of years. Any individuals or businesses who break the law can be fined and even imprisoned. The concept of copyright has been practiced by early Muslims since the period of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Patent, on the other hand, is an exclusive right given to an inventor for a limited period of time to exclude others from making, using, selling, or importing an innovation. As the inventor has the right to use or sell his invention, permission from the inventor is required by others to access and utilize it. If one is involved in the patent infringement, the patent holder must sue the unauthorized person in federal district court to stop his or her activities as well as to receive compensation for the unauthorized use.
The protection of ownership can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals 8 and 16.
As we can see from the acquisition of ownership of property, the absolute owner of all resources, wealth, and factors of production in this world is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We as borrowers can get the acquisition by three ways, which are contract, inheritance, and first possession of the natural resources. From constraints and limitations of ownership, humans are given a freedom of choice in decision making as long as it is according to Sharia laws. However, there are constraints and limitations that they have to follow in order to acquire and utilize the ownership. In the protection of ownership, Sharia dictates some laws and regulations as a guide to the owner of the property as well as other individuals so that they will not misuse their right and authority that are granted to them. To conclude, ownership under Islamic economic model can be related to SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, which goal is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. This goal aims at ensuring the economic sector of every country provided the basic need for its residents to have a good life no matter what their background, race, or culture. Hence, this is in line with our topic, ownership under the Islamic economic model.